Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Neal, I'm with CMB. We're an insights agency. We work with a lot of different corporations. And as it comes to AI, we don't make the actual tools, but we're basically a fiduciary advisor to our clients. So we've tested over 70 different tools. We do lots of A/B testing. We try to replicate studies that were done without AI, with AI, and see what works, what doesn't. So in this process, we've developed a lot of kind of best and worst practices, and more importantly, how humans and AI can work together effectively for different types of projects.
And I'm Ananya. I focus on commercial monetization research at Microsoft.
So in the interest of time, I think we're going to move right forward to our case study, which is great. We teamed up with Microsoft to basically replicate a human-moderated qualitative IDI project that was recently done. We kept everything the same. We went back and we did it with AI moderation.
So before we get into the specifics of exactly what we tested, let's go back a little bit. So traditionally, when we're thinking of doing research, we broadly look at two sort of options, right? So one, we have these online surveys where we have less time with people, but we're able to get more sample size. And then on the other end of that spectrum is essentially in-depth interviews, so more qualitative research, where we have more time with people, but we don't necessarily have the same type of sample sizes. Now, this is especially true in B2B research, which is pretty much my world. So now with conversational AI, we sort of have this spectrum, the middle of between survey and in-depth interviews that has really opened up. And in this particular case study, we focused on AI-moderated interviews that were semi-structured. So a mix of open-ended and close-ended questions. The ratio itself in our case was about 30% of them were closed-ended questions. The rest of it was exploratory conversation. But it can be different. And we have successfully trialed this approach at Microsoft with a few different audiences. So tech decision makers, consumers, gamers, and then we have also successfully tried this approach for a few different topics, including pricing, concept testing, jobs to be done, and then purchase journey research. So to set some context here, in this case, we specifically recruited people to give their feedback via video. You can also do audio and text. So the bot moderator itself interacted with people via text, and then people were able to respond via video themselves. So on the right, you can see a little bit of a sneak peek of what it looks like. So this was pretty much our first foray into validating whether this AI-moderated interview approach itself is viable or not. So now the case study you see here on the right, this is a very specific one example, but we have tested this with a lot of, we've done a lot more projects now than we had done. So this was sort of our first one back in summer of last year. And we wanted to test a few things. So the first one was whether this approach is viable or not. Second, we wanted to see if people like the experience, would they be likely to do something like this again? And then lastly, do we see similar results between our human-moderated interviews and then the AI-moderated interviews? The thing on the right, the two things I would like you to take away from that would be that there is significant gains in terms of the actual fieldwork, scheduling, report delivery, all of that time, depending on the AI platform you actually use. So there are some gains there. And if you go to the next slide, Chris, let's get into the specifics here. So what did we do differently for these AI-moderated interviews, right? So we, in the initial sort of beginning of this experimentation, we did do human-moderated interviews, and then we supplemented that with AI-moderated interviews. There were a few differences, though. So think of it as like a human researcher is developing a research discussion guide. You program questions, probes, depending on where you want the bot to go during the conversation into the platform itself. And then you can pretty much conduct fieldwork like sending a survey link. So people can do this pretty much asynchronously whenever they want. Now, a few changes that worked really well for us when we were designing the discussion guide were, one, just a shorter LOI. So our traditional interviews were somewhere between 50, 60 minutes. And then now with AI moderation interviews, we've cut it down to about half. We've sort of noticed good engagement at that point. So 30 minutes has been a pretty good sweet spot for us. We did cut some of the intro sections, some of the rapport that you need to set with a human moderator. You don't need to do that. With AI moderation, you can get directly into the topic. We did have a semi-structured guide. I talked about this earlier. We limited additional exploration. So we had some very specific topics that we wanted to answer, and we wanted to get nuance behind those. And then lastly, I think this is probably the most important thing here, which is testing. So you do want to test your programmed guide again and again. Don't make assumptions. Make sure your conversation is logical and it flows naturally. So test and then test again.
Great, thanks. So in the actual execution of the project, of course, we were able to accelerate fielding. We've separately toyed around with different ways of telling respondents, look, log in at a specific day and time, thinking maybe we'll get a better show rate versus asynchronously. For the B2B tech audience, we've consistently found you give them like a window, they can go and do it, because anyone who's done B2B tech human moderation, you have lots of cancellations because they're busy people. So this is a huge advantage. The recruiting, because of that, was almost more like online survey recruiting. Now, some clients are going to want to have a stop gate, have people do the recruit, review everything, make sure all the team is on board with it, and then schedule them. Others will just do the screener and go right into the recruiting. You can do it either way with AI moderation. It just impacts the scheduling benefits if you do the latter. The costs do vary. So we're in this weird space right now where, especially if you use like expert networks, you'll pay a lot for an hour interview with an expert. You'll pay a lot less for 15 to 20 minutes self-administered online survey. So what's a fair price? If you have 30 minutes AI moderation, it's like 80% open-end, 20% closed, and we're sort of blending the lines between qualitative and quantitative. So we're collectively figuring that out. It is a new world. So again, this is a learning curve for everyone, but it's something to think about as you map out exactly what you want to do with the respondents and who you want to do it with. In terms of the experience, we actually followed up with the people who did these AI moderated interviews afterwards and basically asked them, how did it go? And we had really, really good feedback, which is great because we're a little bit nervous going in. We didn't know how this B2B audience is going to react to it. I think one of the reasons we got good feedback is because we trained and tested the moderator bot a lot. So again, you've heard this in other presentations. +1 here. Absolutely, you got to train it. You have to test it if you do your homework. And if you put it to the type of project where you have guardrails and you know exactly what you're looking for and you don't expect it to do something that, frankly, only a human moderator is good at, you're going to get good results. And as Ananya mentioned, they have tested it with other audiences. But you might have different audiences. You want to trial this first before you do a big project to make sure you don't get a huge backlash to interaction with an AI moderator. And of course, you need to be transparent. So you need to tell people when you're recruiting them, this is going to be an AI moderated interview, and it's going to be voice or video, so they know what they're getting into when they go into it. And then back to that previous 3x3 you saw, there's considerations if you want them to do a video response versus a text response. On some of our quant surveys, we're doing some quality quant. We do text only because a lot of panelists don't want to do the video, or we give them the option. So we're still testing what are some of the non-response bias impacts of doing that. And also, what are some of the data impacts of doing those different modes of both the AI moderator interacting with the participant and how the participant gives that feedback back. In the analysis and reporting phase, the good news is whether you do AI moderation or human moderation, there's a lot of cool tools out there that can really take big qual and get you well over 50% of the way there. If you use the same platform that you used for the moderation, I'd say there's even more possibilities of getting things linked to specific questions you asked. If you have, intelligent branching based on different participants, you can navigate all that to get to the specific parts of the transcripts of the videos that you want. So that's really cool. One thing to consider, though, is because no humans were involved in the data collection, you don't have a moderator with all that context in their brain when they sit down to write the report. You didn't have any clients observing in real time in the back room. So in that sense, you're sort of starting from scratch. That's the con of it. But the pro is you have a lot of really cool tools to help speed that process up. And as Ananya mentioned, we did do a mix of quant and qual. You're going to see some percentages later on, and I'm sorry, they're based on low sample size, but the lines are blurring, and I think because we know what we wanted, and we knew that different people would react differently to an initial conversation thread, you need to get to the point faster because, again, the length of interview is really, really important. Once you're doing AI moderation, if you tell them 30 minutes, it can easily go way over if you're not careful in how you program it. So some of that should be structured so you can make the best use of that participant's time. And then, of course, we want to see, were the results the same? Super important, right? For all the main findings, the answer was yes, which is good. But there was one interesting difference. There was a lower willingness to pay. And anyone who's done B2B tech pricing and packaging research knows that overstatement and unrealistically inelastic demand curves are a perennial stone in our shoe. So something we're always trying to solve. In this case, this is just some example of, we have like a good, better, best portfolio. On this side here, we had the original human moderated IDIs. We had about 2/3 of the sample doing the better and the best. When we redid the exact same study, same fielding, everything, about half did the base model, and about 40% did the mid, and almost nobody did the high end. And then we also asked just a willingness to pay question of the mid-range, and it was about a half of the top 2 box. So it's different. This is a sample size of 1. This is a super interesting area. We're doing more kind of A/B testing, especially on the quant side, to see, will this make a difference? But we thought it was pretty interesting, and we're looking into it further. We've done some qualitative baked into conjoint studies separate from this case study, and I've seen like higher root likelihood scores, people paying more attention to the task as they go through it. So we're going to be looking more at some pricing impacts going forward.
So at this point, we have determined across the different and many, many studies that we've run that AI moderation can be a good fit and a viable tool in our toolkit. So when should you use it? In our experience, we have found success in a few different things. So one, when you have narrow scope of your research, you have specific things you want to answer, and then you want to get context behind it. When you have a semi-structured kind of a discussion guide itself, so you have some, structured questions in there, and then you want nuance. So if you keep going, Chris, to the next one. So this format works very well for semi-structured research, as I said. And then when you want this nuance at scale. So increasingly, we are testing very complex problems at Microsoft where we think we need more than the 15 minutes we get with a traditional survey, but we don't necessarily have the budget or the time to do these fully, 60-minute qualitative interviews with like 100, 200 people. So this is a really good middle ground approach for us. So we get nuance, but at scale. And a very interesting thing to what Chris was saying earlier is that we have seen that we typically get system 2 responses when we're using this approach, meaning that people get exposed to some concept, they have the time to think about it a little bit, and then record their responses. Meaning that now we're getting more sort of thought through responses. And this is not the way to get knee-jerk reactions, which works very well for us because I focus on monetization research in the B2B world. So we know that B2B world technical decisions are very complex. It's not usually one person making these decisions. So we actually do want people, and we want to encourage them to give us their system 2 responses. And then lastly, we could potentially see more honest responses. Now, this is super important for us because we do so much pricing research. We know it's a sensitive topic, and we get a lot of overstatement in research, right? It's fictional dollars. It's easy to spend it. So we employ a lot of ways to actually get what people would do in the real world. So we think this approach could actually give us more honest responses. Now, in closing, I know we have a little bit of time here, but just some things that you should take away from here should be, one, the biggest advantage of this approach in our experience has been speed and scale. Now, when we did our first set of experiments, we only ended up doing 10 AI interviews, and that was mostly because of timing, budget kind of reasons. But so you will see substantial cost savings kick in as you scale, because there is some cost associated, obviously, with the sample, with setting up the discussion guide, all of that stuff. But then with every incremental AI interview you do, there's only really minor licensing fees there. So you can see some good cost savings as you scale up. So speed and scale, but cost savings can also be an advantage. Be specific. With a bot, you want to make sure with conversational AI, your questions are very precise. And then talking back to the point that Chris was making earlier about price sensitivity, this is something that we're still validating. So we need to actively investigate if we will continue to see increased price sensitivity in our AI moderated interviews. And then moving on, keep your interview length short. 30 minutes has been a good sweet spot so far. That's worked out very well. We start to see engagement dipping when we cross that point. Bots can't read into the silence, so you won't really get real agency from bot moderated interviews. So keep that in mind when you decide to use this approach. And then if you go ahead, I already talked about this one, do expect more system to responses. So this is not the format you want to use if you want knee-jerk reactions from people. And then lastly, bots can ask repeated questions. So make sure you test. It's really critical because you want to have consistent length of interview and you do not want to piss off people by asking the same question again and again. So just a few takeaways for you as you think about utilizing this approach.
Great, thanks. Thank you all for coming. We're doing a lot of different work. There's a lot of cool technologies here. We're testing them. This is the beginning, not the end. And human moderators aren't going away. We love them. So we have a lot of combo projects where we do some human moderation, some AI. So I can talk your ear off about that as well. We'll both be around if you have questions afterwards.